Let's understand 7 basic Chinese character radicals, since they were drawings back 3000 years ago in China until the meaning they have today. Part 3. 1. That's the character for Earth, which originally came from the picture of a pile of earth. Instead of drawing it round, they started to make a cross in the middle to represent the bulge. It appears in compounds such as soil, arena, slope, arrive, and castle. In other words, things relating to earth, constructions, and places, since by that time every place was on earth. 2. You may have seen many characters that have a frame around, but what does this frame mean? Among these characters is country, garden, prisoner, and around. From that we see it refers to enclosed spaces. It looks similar to the radical for mouth, which I explained in another video, but in antiquity it came from a frame that was rounded, unlike the mouth that had lips. Maybe remember this rounded frame from my last video in the radical for village. It's the same idea. Supposedly this frame represents walls around a city, something very common in ancient China, therefore it refers to places. 3. Despite being hard to see a knife in this character nowadays, it originally came from this drawing. It was the drawing of a curved dagger and it meant knife. Since every character must fit inside a square, the shape of the knife was squished, so that the handle nowadays takes most of the character. When it appears as a radical, it's further reduced to 2 vertical strokes, looking like this. It appears in characters that have to do with cutting, such as sword, separate, punishment, or profit. This last one adds a cereal plant to the knife, representing the harvest. 4. This character comes from the picture of a very common weapon in ancient China. It was a pole with a transversal blade, being swung around in the battlefield. It's called the dagger axe, even though it looks like the Western halberd. This radical appears in characters such as fight, country, or attack, and even had variations such as these, which originally depicted similar weapons, making up compounds with warlike meanings. 5. This drawing may not be easy to recognize at first, but it's the drawing of a hand. We can see the 5 fingers around. It was simplified this way, appearing as a radical to mean it has something to do with a hand. It's in characters such as embrace, hit, pinch, or collect. 6. This radical comes from the color of a cloth, being this pictogram here. But when it becomes a radical, it looks a lot like the radical for God, which I explained in another video. The difference is that it has an extra stroke. It's nice to remember that this kind of simplification is common in every language. Our alphabet itself has the letters B, D, Q, and P, which also became similar to simplify writing. This radical appears in sleeve, cover, patch, and double. 7. Just from looking, you can see that this radical looks a lot like the radical for tree, having only 1 extra stroke above. That's because it also comes from the picture of a plant. In antiquity, its drawing was this one, a plant with a kind of spike above. It represented a special kind of plant, a cereal plant. In China, the millet and the rice were 2 of the first plants to be domesticated by humans, being cultivated by at least 8,000 years. And that explains why this plant, which is believed to be millet or rice, was used to represent all kinds of cereal crops. Every time you see this radical in a character, you know it has something to do with agriculture. For instance, these are the characters for seed, grain, and rice, which are quite straightforward. And these are the ones for profit and tax, which think of agriculture as an economical activity. Did you see how radicals can actually make sense? It's much easier to understand this Asian script when you know the reasoning behind it. After all, this writing was invented more than 3,000 years ago and is still used across all East Asia. If you'd like to understand how it spread from China to Japan and Korea, feel free to check this video here.